Dr. Marcus Thompson here. 28 years as a neurologist at St. Vincent's Medical Center, board certified in both neurology and geriatric medicine. Harvard Medical School, Johns Hopkins residency, published extensively on neurodegenerative diseases. I've seen thousands of Alzheimer's patients progress through the devastating stages of cognitive decline. Nothing prepared me for Dorothy Whitman. Dorothy arrived in 2019, 73 years old, advanced stage Alzheimer's. Her daughter Lisa brought her after Dorothy wandered from their home and was found 3 miles away, unable to recognize her own neighborhood. The intake notes describe typical late-stage presentation, severe disorientation, minimal verbal response, inability to perform basic activities of daily living. Initial examination revealed what I expected. Dorothy scored 3 out of 30 on the mini mental state examination. She couldn't state her name, the year, or recognize her daughter. Her brain MRI showed extensive hippocampal atrophy, enlarged ventricles, and widespread cortical thinning consistent with advanced Alzheimer's pathology. The damage was irreversible and extensive. For 18 months, Dorothy remained in our long-term care unit. She required complete assistance with feeding, toileting, and mobility. Her cognitive function showed the expected decline, periods of agitation alternating with profound lethargy, occasional word salad, and complete disconnection from reality. Her family visited weekly, though Dorothy showed no recognition. The medications we prescribed, donepezil, memantine, provided minimal benefit, as expected in advanced cases. Dorothy's condition deteriorated predictably. By early 2021, she was largely bedbound, requiring pureed foods and experiencing frequent episodes of aspiration pneumonia. Her neurological status remained consistently poor across all assessments. On March 15, 2021, everything changed. I was conducting morning rounds when Nurse Patricia Williams approached me with an unusual expression. "Dr. Thompson, you need to see Mrs. Whitman immediately. She's different today." The concern in Patricia's voice was unmistakable. Patricia had 20 years' experience with dementia patients and rarely showed alarm. I entered Dorothy's room expecting another routine assessment. Instead, I found her sitting upright in bed, alert and oriented. Her eyes tracked my movement with clear recognition. "Good morning, doctor," she said with perfect articulation. "I believe we need to discuss my condition." The voice was strong, coherent, and completely unlike anything I'd heard from Dorothy before. My first assumption was terminal lucidity, a well-documented phenomenon where dementia patients experience brief periods of clarity before death. However, Dorothy's presentation exceeded typical lucid intervals. She answered orientation questions perfectly: name, date, location, current president. Her recall of recent events in the ward demonstrated intact short-term memory formation. "Doctor, I know this seems impossible," Dorothy continued, "but I remember everything from the past 18 months. Every conversation around my bed, every procedure, every family visit. I was aware but couldn't respond. It was like being trapped inside my own mind, watching everything happen to someone else." I performed an immediate cognitive assessment. Dorothy scored 28 out of 30 on the MMSE, a dramatic improvement from her baseline of 3. Her language was fluent, her memory intact for both recent and remote events. She demonstrated complex reasoning abilities and showed no signs of the confusion or disorientation characteristic of her previous state. The medical impossibility struck me immediately. Advanced Alzheimer's involves irreversible neuronal death and widespread brain atrophy. The hippocampus, essential for memory formation, showed severe damage on her most recent MRI from 6 months prior. Neurons don't regenerate in this manner. The brain tissue was gone, yet somehow Dorothy was functioning normally. I ordered immediate blood work to rule out metabolic causes, complete metabolic panel, thyroid function, B12 levels, inflammatory markers. All results returned within normal limits. No infections, no electrolyte imbalances, nothing that could explain this dramatic cognitive improvement. Her physical examination remained unchanged from previous assessments. Dorothy seemed to anticipate my confusion. "Doctor, I know you're searching for medical explanations. There aren't any. What I experienced wasn't unconsciousness. It was awareness without the ability to express that awareness. I heard everything. I saw everything. I just couldn't respond until now." To verify her claims, I tested Dorothy's recall of specific events from her hospitalization. She accurately described conversations I'd had with her daughter about treatment options. She recalled the night shift nurse who sang softly while administering medications. She described the physical therapy sessions where she appeared completely unresponsive. Dorothy's knowledge extended beyond surface observations. She quoted verbatim discussions between medical staff about her prognosis, mentioned specific medication changes, and described the emotional reactions of family members during visits. This level of detailed retention should have been impossible given her documented cognitive state. I consulted with Dr. Robert Martinez, our chief of neurology, presenting the case without revealing Dorothy's identity initially. "Impossible," he stated firmly. "Advanced Alzheimer's with that degree of hippocampal atrophy cannot suddenly reverse. You're describing neurological regeneration that doesn't exist in current medical literature." When I brought Dr. Martinez to meet Dorothy, his skepticism transformed into bewilderment. She engaged him in complex discussions about neurological pathways, demonstrated intact executive function, and showed no signs of the cognitive deficits documented in her extensive medical records. Martinez requested immediate neuroimaging to compare with previous studies. The urgent MRI results arrived the following day. Surprisingly, Dorothy's brain showed significant improvement from her previous scan. The hippocampal atrophy remained, but new areas of activity appeared on functional imaging. Dr. Martinez stared at the scans for long minutes before admitting he'd never seen anything comparable. Dorothy's family was understandably incredulous when I called to report her improvement. Lisa arrived within hours, expecting to find her mother in her typical unresponsive state. Instead, Dorothy greeted her daughter by name, asked about her grandchildren's school activities, and engaged in meaningful conversation about family matters. "Mum, is it really you?" Lisa asked through tears. Dorothy smiled and recounted specific childhood memories they'd shared, details about Lisa's marriage, and concerns about family finances that had been discussed during her apparent catatonic state. The emotional reunion was profound, yet medically inexplicable. Word of Dorothy's case spread throughout the hospital. Colleagues from various departments visited to witness the impossible recovery. Dr. Amanda Foster from psychiatry evaluated Dorothy for potential psychotic episodes or dissociative disorders. Her assessment revealed no psychiatric pathology. Dorothy demonstrated normal mood, appropriate affect, and reality-based thinking. Dorothy seemed remarkably calm about her situation, showing no distress about her previous condition or concern about potential relapse. When I asked how she felt about her experience, she replied, "Doctor, consciousness isn't what medical science believes it to be. The brain is important, but it's not the complete picture." Over the following days, I conducted extensive neuropsychological testing. Dorothy's performance was within normal limits across all domains: attention, executive function, language, memory, and visuospatial processing. Her results were inconsistent with any known presentation of Alzheimer's disease, yet her brain pathology remained evident on imaging. During one of our extended conversations, Dorothy began discussing other patients in the ward with startling familiarity. "Mr. Frederick Nash in room 318 is struggling with his transition," she said, matter-of-factly. "He passed away 3 years ago, but has been trying to communicate with his son Robert about forgiveness." I felt a chill run through me. Frederick Nash had indeed been a patient in room 318, dying from complications of a massive stroke in September 2018. His son Robert had visited irregularly, their relationship strained by years of conflict over Frederick's alcoholism. But Dorothy had been admitted in 2019, well after Frederick's death. "How do you know about Frederick Nash?" I asked carefully. Dorothy's expression grew thoughtful. "During my unresponsive period, I wasn't alone in my awareness. Frederick was there, in the spaces between consciousness and unconsciousness. He's been trying to reach his son, to make amends before moving on." I pulled Frederick's medical records, comparing them with Dorothy's claims. Every detail she provided was accurate. His age at death, the specific complications from his stroke, his family's decision to withdraw life support, and even the chaplain who had provided last rites. Information contained in confidential medical files Dorothy couldn't have accessed. "Frederick described his son's anguish during those final days," Dorothy continued. "Robert blamed himself for their estrangement, for not visiting more often, for harsh words spoken in anger. Frederick desperately wants Robert to know he forgives him, that he's proud of the man his son became despite their troubled relationship." The impossible nature of this information troubled me deeply. I had been Frederick's attending physician during his final admission. Robert Nash had indeed struggled with guilt and anger, breaking down during our final conference about withdrawing life support. But these were private family moments, never documented in any accessible records. Dorothy seemed to sense my discomfort. "I understand your skepticism, Doctor, but consciousness exists in dimensions medical science hasn't yet discovered. Frederick and I shared a space where awareness persists beyond brain function. He's been waiting 3 years to deliver messages of forgiveness and love to his son." Against my better judgment, I found myself researching Robert Nash's current contact information. He worked as a contractor in the same city, had never remarried after his wife's death 2 years prior, and according to public records, still lived alone. I struggled with whether to contact him about his father's supposed messages from beyond death. The case attracted attention from researchers at several universities. Dr. Michael Harrison from the National Institute of Neurological Disorders requested permission to study Dorothy's condition. She agreed to participate, expressing curiosity about what medical science might learn from her experience. During our sessions with Dr. Harrison, Dorothy provided even more specific details about Frederick Nash. She described his final moments of consciousness, his regrets about his relationship with Robert, and his frustration at being unable to communicate during his dying process. The accuracy was unsettling and medically impossible. "Frederick showed me memories of Robert as a child," Dorothy explained to Dr. Harrison. "A Christmas morning when Robert was 7, excited about a bicycle Frederick had assembled all night. Frederick wants Robert to remember that joy, not just their arguments from later years. He was a good father who lost his way with alcohol." I finally decided to contact Robert Nash, requesting a meeting to discuss his father's case. When he arrived, I carefully explained Dorothy's impossible recovery and her claims about communicating with his deceased father. Robert's initial reaction was skeptical dismissal, understandably protective against what might appear to be cruel deception. "My father died 3 years ago," Robert said firmly. "I don't believe in ghosts or psychics or any of that nonsense. If you're trying to exploit my grief for some kind of research study, I'm not interested." His pain was evident despite his defensive anger. I brought Robert to meet Dorothy, introducing her simply as a patient who had mentioned his father. Dorothy looked at Robert with immediate recognition and compassion. "You have your father's eyes," she said gently. "Frederick wants you to know that he's sorry. The alcohol made him someone he never wanted to be." Robert's composure cracked slightly. "How could you possibly know about that? My father's drinking problems weren't public knowledge." Dorothy smiled sadly. "Frederick described your childhood, the promises he made and broke, the disappointment in your eyes when he chose alcohol over family obligations. Over the next hour, Dorothy shared specific memories that only Frederick could have known. Robert's first day of school when Frederick forgot to pick him up, the fishing trip when Frederick taught Robert to tie proper knots, the graduation Frederick missed because he was passed out drunk at home. "The Christmas bicycle," Dorothy said suddenly. "You were 7 years old, so excited you woke up at 5 in the morning. Frederick had worked all night assembling it, hiding his hangover because your joy was more important than his pain. He wants you to remember that version of him." Robert broke down completely. "I haven't thought about that bicycle in 20 years. Dad was so proud when I rode it without training wheels, before everything got so bad between us." The memory was obviously accurate and deeply personal, impossible for Dorothy to know through conventional means. Dorothy reached out and took Robert's hand. "Your father carried guilt about your relationship until his final breath, but he also carried immense pride in the man you became. The construction business you built, the honest work you do, the way you cared for your wife during her illness. Frederick saw all of it. He's been watching over you these past 3 years," Dorothy continued, "hoping for a chance to tell you that none of the anger matters anymore. He forgives you for the harsh words, and he desperately needs you to forgive him for the pain his addiction caused our family." Robert wept openly, years of suppressed grief and guilt pouring out. "I do forgive him. I should have told him before he died. I was just so angry, so hurt. I thought I had more time." Dorothy squeezed his hand gently. "He knows, Robert. Frederick feels your forgiveness, and he can finally rest peacefully." The reunion between father and son, mediated through Dorothy's impossible consciousness, was profoundly healing for Robert. When he left that day, his entire demeanor had changed from bitter regret to peaceful acceptance. Whatever mechanism had allowed this communication, its therapeutic impact was undeniable. Dorothy's remarkable recovery continued for 6 weeks. She participated in physical therapy, regained independence in daily activities, and maintained normal cognitive function across all assessments. Her family began planning for discharge to a less restrictive care environment. The improvement seemed stable and sustained. Then, on April 26th, Dorothy developed sudden onset respiratory distress. Her oxygen saturation dropped precipitously, and she became increasingly lethargic. Blood tests revealed no obvious cause, no signs of infection, pulmonary embolism, or cardiac issues. Her cognitive function remained intact despite the physical deterioration. As I examined Dorothy that evening, she grasped my hand with surprising strength. "Doctor, my time is ending. The consciousness that allowed me to return is being called elsewhere. Frederick has completed his message to Robert, and my purpose here is fulfilled." "What purpose?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. Dorothy smiled peacefully. "To help Frederick find peace by healing his son's heart. Some connections transcend death, but they need living vessels to complete their work. I was honored to serve as that bridge between father and son." Despite aggressive medical intervention, Dorothy's condition deteriorated rapidly. Her family gathered for what appeared to be her final hours. Throughout the decline, she remained alert and communicative, saying goodbye to each family member individually and expressing gratitude for the time she'd been given to reconnect with them. Dorothy died peacefully at 3:47 a.m. on April 27th, surrounded by her family. Her final words to me were, "Doctor, remember that consciousness isn't produced by the brain. It's experienced through the brain. There's a difference that medical science will eventually understand." The autopsy results confirmed my fears and expectations. Dorothy's brain showed severe, irreversible Alzheimer's pathology consistent with her original diagnosis. The hippocampal damage was extensive, with widespread neuronal loss and amyloid plaques throughout the cortex. No medical explanation existed for her 6-week period of normal cognitive function. Dr. Martinez and I spent hours reviewing Dorothy's case, searching for rational explanations. We considered rare genetic variants, atypical disease presentations, and measurement errors. Every potential explanation fell short of accounting for the dramatic, temporary reversal of advanced neurodegeneration. 3 weeks after Dorothy's death, Robert Nash visited the hospital with a remarkable discovery. While cleaning out his father's personal effects, a task he'd been unable to complete for 3 years, he found a letter addressed to him, written in Frederick's handwriting, but dated just 1 week before Dorothy's awakening. The letter contained every message Dorothy had conveyed: apologies for his alcoholism, pride in Robert's accomplishments, specific memories of their better times together, and expressions of forgiveness for their estrangement. "I found this hidden in Dad's Bible," Robert explained. "He must have written it before his stroke, but never gave it to me." The timing was impossible to dismiss as coincidence. Frederick had somehow known, 1 week before Dorothy's miraculous recovery, exactly what messages needed to be delivered to his son. Whether through prophetic insight or supernatural intervention, the letter confirmed every detail Dorothy had communicated during her impossible lucidity. Dr. Harrison documented the entire case, including Robert's letter discovery, for submission to consciousness research journals. The combination of Dorothy's medical impossibility and Frederick's prescient letter created a compelling argument for consciousness existing beyond measurable brain function. The case has been documented and submitted to several neurological journals, though publication remains uncertain due to the extraordinary nature of the claims. Medical reviewers struggle with how to categorize a case that challenges fundamental assumptions about brain function and consciousness. Dorothy's family has requested copies of all medical records and documentation of her recovery period. Lisa told me that her mother had mentioned Frederick Nash specifically during her lucid period, saying she was helping an old friend complete important family business before moving on together. 6 months after Dorothy's death, Robert Nash established a scholarship fund in his father's memory for children of parents struggling with addiction. The healing Dorothy facilitated between father and son had transformed Robert's bitterness into purposeful action, creating positive legacy from decades of family pain. I continue practicing neurology at St. Vincent's Medical Center, but Dorothy Whitman's case remains the most profound professional experience of my career. It challenged everything I believed about consciousness, death, and the limitations of medical science. Some mysteries may exceed our current ability to understand. The experience has also affected my personal views on death and dying. I'm more attentive to patients' final communications, more respectful of family reports about awareness in unconscious patients, and more humble about the limitations of current medical knowledge regarding consciousness and death. Recently, I've considered transitioning from clinical practice to research focused on consciousness studies. Dorothy's case demonstrated that medical science has significant gaps in understanding fundamental aspects of human awareness and the relationship between mind and brain. Every time I walk past the room where Dorothy experienced her impossible recovery, I remember her final words about consciousness existing beyond brain function. Medical science will eventually need to grapple with cases like Dorothy's, even if current paradigms can't accommodate such experiences. The photograph that Lisa found among Dorothy's belongings, showing her mother with an elderly man at a community center in 2018, was initially puzzling, but church records confirmed that Frederick Nash had volunteered at the same senior center where Dorothy participated in early-stage Alzheimer's support groups. They had known each other before either became my patient. This connection provided a rational foundation for their supernatural communication. Dorothy and Frederick had shared conversations about their families, their fears, their regrets. Their bond, formed during Dorothy's early disease progression, somehow persisted beyond Frederick's death and Dorothy's cognitive decline, manifesting during her miraculous recovery. Dorothy's case file remains in my office, a reminder that medical science, despite its remarkable achievements, still has much to learn about the fundamental nature of human consciousness. Her 6-week recovery from advanced Alzheimer's defied every principle of neurology I'd learned, yet it happened, healing 2 souls in the process. I've shared Dorothy's story with select colleagues and researchers, hoping to contribute to a broader understanding of consciousness and its relationship to brain function. While the case challenges conventional medical wisdom, dismissing it entirely would be intellectually dishonest. The bond between Dorothy Whitman and Frederick Nash, two souls connected by shared experience, separated by death, reunited through impossible consciousness, reminds me that human connections may transcend the boundaries medical science currently recognizes. Their story changed not only my understanding of neurology, but my approach to life and death. 28 years of neurology practice taught me that medical science is constantly evolving, with new discoveries regularly challenging established beliefs. Dorothy Whitman's case might represent an early glimpse of consciousness phenomena that future medical science will better understand and explain. Until that understanding emerges, I continue practicing medicine with renewed humility about the limitations of current knowledge. Dorothy's impossible recovery and her facilitation of healing between Frederick Nash and his son remind me that medical science, despite its sophistication, still has profound mysteries to solve. Her case changed not only my understanding of neurology, but my approach to life and death. I'm more open to possibilities beyond current medical paradigms, more attentive to the subjective experiences of patients, and more humble about the vast unknowns that remain in medical science. Dorothy Whitman and Frederick Nash taught me that consciousness might be far more complex and mysterious than 28 years of medical training had suggested. Their case remains unexplained, documented, but not understood. A reminder that medical science still has much to discover about the fundamental nature of human awareness and the persistence of love beyond death.